Hi everyone! Welcome to Kids Worship. Guys, as you know, we are now entering the Christmas season. Christmas is the day we have chosen to celebrate Jesus being born. We don't actually know the exact day Jesus was born, but we do know he was born, and Christmas is the day we choose to celebrate. We should celebrate Jesus coming to earth all year long, but there's one special day that we usually celebrate with gifts and special foods. From today to Christmas week, we're going to see the Christmas story, focusing on two questions. Number one, why did Jesus come to the world? And number two, why did Jesus come when he did? I hope you will be able to answer those questions after we learn the lessons. And it is so much more important than anything we might do to celebrate Christmas. The title of the Christmas story we are going to see is it time yet? And today's verse, Genesis 3:15. Let's read it together. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. We have one more verse. Galatians 4:4 and 5. Let's read it together. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. I know the verse sounds a bit difficult to understand, but don't worry, we are going to work on this verse later. Guys, what time is it now? It is 11 a.m. Sunday, and we gather together here because it's time for worship, right? Time is how you know when things happen. For example, you know that if you wake up at 2 in the morning, it's not time for breakfast. Breakfast is at 7, school is at 8, and your favorite time of all is 2:30, snack time. There's a right time for everything. The book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, chapter 3, talks about time and season. It says, for everything there's a season, a time for every activity under heaven. Time to be born, time to die, time to plant, and a time to harvest. Everything has a perfect time. And the scripture says, God has made everything beautiful in his time. In order to understand the Christmas story, we should know the one grand story that goes on throughout the Bible. And we have to go back to the very beginning of it. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning. These are the first 3 words of the greatest story ever. What else story in the world can talk about what happened in the very beginning of the world? No other story tells us about the very beginning of the world. But you know what? Even more important is the next word. God is the most important word in the story because this is his story. Bible is the story of God. The Bible is the story of God rescuing his people. The story starts by telling us that God is there. Before anything, there's God. God is eternal. He has always been. He will always be. He's from everlasting to everlasting. Again, this is his story. So, is it time yet? No, the story has just begun, but what a beginning it is. And then God spoke into the darkness. God spoke into the emptiness. God spoke and made a world. God spoke simple words. Let there be light. And there was light. God spoke and made light. God spoke and made land and seas. God spoke and made day and night, and the sun, moon, and stars. God spoke and made plants. God spoke and made birds, fish, and all the animals from the smallest mouse to the tallest giraffe. And then God made people. God made a world. And God made it all good. Nothing was bad, nothing was sad. So, is it time yet? No, not yet. At that time, God's good people lived in God's perfect place and had a perfect relationship with Him. Sadly, God's perfect place didn't stay perfect forever, and the perfect relationship between God and His people was destroyed. God had given His people a beautiful garden full of trees for food. God had given them the job of caring for it, and He had given them one rule: don't eat from the tree in the middle of the garden. How do you think it went? You know the story already, right? Try to put yourself in Adam and Eve's shoes and think about what you would do with the rule God gave you. The story so-called fall is an important part of our story, so check it out from the video.
So part of God's story is about the first time people stopped trusting God. It's called the fall because it's all about how we fell away from God. It begins like this. When God was done creating a perfect world, the first two humans, Adam and Eve, got to live as a family in a beautiful place called the Garden of Eden. They explored wherever they wanted and took walks with God. And God took care of them like a loving father. The Garden of Eden was a perfect home. In fact, Adam and Eve were so free they didn't even wear clothes. God wanted everybody to be this free, with no shame or embarrassment. Imagine no death, no secrets, no fighting, no fear, no pain, no loneliness, no anger, no bullies, no sadness, no hunger, no getting left out, no crying, nothing bad, ever. This is God's dream for all of us. But part of being free means we get choices. And the first bad choice happened in the Garden of Eden. See, God gave Adam and Eve one rule. Do not eat fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden. God knew if Adam and Eve ate this fruit, they would think they knew everything good and didn't need God anymore. They would stop asking God to take care of them. And they would know about evil, which means they would hurt each other. Sickness would come. They would get old and eventually die. God didn't want any of that to happen, so He told them not to eat the fruit. Now, you might be wondering why God would even make a tree like that in the first place. Why give Adam and Eve a chance to know how to ruin the perfect world? But remember how being free means we get to make choices? God wants us to choose to obey because we love Him, not because we have to. And for a while, Adam and Eve chose to trust God and obey Him. After all, it was perfect in the garden. But one day, an evil serpent decided he wanted to separate Adam and Eve from God. So he came up with a plan to make Eve think God didn't love her. He said, "Does God really love you? If He does, why won't He let you eat this juicy, delicious fruit?" Eve told the serpent what God had told Adam. If they ate the fruit, they would die. The snake told Eve that God was lying. The fruit would only make her smart. Being smart sounded great. So Eve bit into the fruit. It tasted so good, she gave some to Adam. He ate it too. Well, they didn't drop dead on the spot, but things started to change. First, they realized they were naked and felt embarrassed. Before eating the fruit, they only felt happy. Then they heard God coming and ran away. They had never run away from God before. God knew what happened, but He still asked Adam, "Did you eat the fruit I asked you not to eat?" Adam said, "Eve made me do it." Eve didn't like being blamed. She said, "The serpent made me do it." Really, they had both made a choice to disobey God. God was so sad they chose not to trust Him. They had to move away from the beautiful garden. Worse, pain and sadness and death came into the world. It was no longer perfect. This could have been a horrible end to a really sad story. But guess what? It's not. God loved Adam and Eve, and us, so much that he planned a great rescue. Many years later, a rescuer would take the punishment for every bad choice ever made. And because of this rescue, God would one day make the world a perfect home for us again. And that's the story of the fall. So in case you missed it, here's a quick version. God made a perfect world. There was one rule. The serpent tricked Eve. He made her doubt God's love. So Eve broke the rule. Adam broke it too. All the wrong things in the world started. But that's not the end. God really did love them, and all of us. So he began a great rescue plan. And that's a part of God's story.
As you saw from the video, one day God's enemy, the serpent, came to the man and woman in the garden and told them to eat. He told them to eat from the tree in the middle of the garden. He told them that if they ate from the tree, they would become like God. The woman ate, and she gave some to the man. That was the first sin. God's people had broken God's one rule, and their relationship would never be the same again. God punished the serpent. God punished the man. God punished the woman. And God promised that one day a man would crush the serpent and make everything good again. As in Genesis 3:15 that we read earlier, he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. This was God's prophecy that tells what would happen to Christ and Satan in the future. So, is it time yet? Not yet. The man and the woman, Adam and Eve, were sent away from God's perfect place and away from God's presence. But they left with a promise that one day, when the time was right, a rescuer would come. In the garden, everything was perfect, but outside the garden, everything went from bad to worse. Sin kept rolling, but it's not the time yet. Galatians 4:4 and 5 that we read earlier talks about time. It says, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons." It sounds a little bit difficult, doesn't it? More simply put, we could say, when the right time had come, God sent Jesus into the world. He was born as a baby to live as a man. Jesus came to rescue God's people from sin, death, and the penalty of breaking God's law. And he came to bring them home as God's children. Now let's take a time to walk through these verses word by word and make sense of them. Take a look at the first word, but. Anytime you see the word but at the beginning of a sentence, it's a little clue telling you that it's connected to the verse before. It tells us that this verse is opposed or opposite to what we read before it. In this case, if you read the previous verse, Paul, the author of Galatians, was talking about how before Jesus, we were slaves to sin and the world. But now something different happened because of Jesus. Next word, when. When tells us that we are looking at a specific time. Remember, time is the theme of our Christmas story. Next word, fullness, means complete. Throughout the Bible, there were promises and prophecies of Jesus coming. When Jesus came, it was the perfect time. The time was complete. It was the fullness of time. Next word is time. Here comes time again and tells us that this was a very specific point in history. Jesus coming to the world is not like once upon a time as in fairy tales. It is very specific and real in history. And next word, had come, tells us that this specific time has already happened. Next word, God. Who is God? If someone asks you this question, how would you answer? One of the first things we learn about God in the Bible is God was there in the beginning, which means no one made God, and He made everything in the world, and He made everything good. Next word, sent forth. God sent something. We'll see what and who God sent. But for now, let's focus on the truth that God did the sending. In other words, the coming of Jesus was God's plan. Next word, His Son. Who is His Son? His Son is Jesus. And the focus of our Christmas story is on the coming of Jesus to the world, right? However, the book of John chapter 1 says that Jesus was with God already in the beginning, and the world was created through Him. Jesus was there even in the beginning, even before He came to the world. So, the coming of Jesus means that Jesus, the Son of God, became a person to be with us. This is some huge truth about Jesus. Jesus is fully God, and He became fully man. Next word, born of a woman. Just like every other person in the world, Jesus was born. He had a mom. Do you know her name? Right, she's Mary. And this points us right back to Genesis 3:15 that we read earlier. Jesus was the offspring of a woman who would crush the serpent. Next word, born under the law. What is the law? The law refers to the law that God gave His people through Moses to show them how to live as God's people. So all Israelites from the time of Moses were born under the law. Moreover, the law wasn't just for Israelites. The law was for everyone. The law showed people what God expected. And because of the law, everyone in the whole world could see how far away from God's perfection they were, because they all kept breaking the law. Next word is redeem. What does redeem mean? Have you ever been to Chuck E. Cheese or some place like that? Played games and won tickets? At the end of your time there, you would go to the redemption counter and trade your tickets for a prize. You would buy the prize with your tickets, right? In the case of Jesus, He came to redeem or pay the price for us. What was the price He paid? Back in Genesis 2, when Adam and Eve were told not to eat from the tree, they were told the punishment would be death. When they ate from the tree in Genesis 3, they were kicked out of the garden away from God. And instead of living forever with God, they died. And everyone since then had died in their sin. Jesus came to pay that price. Jesus came to die in the place of His people. Next word, those under the law. Jesus came to redeem or pay the price for those under the law. Who is under the law? Right, everyone. So, Jesus came to redeem or pay the price for everyone in the world. Alright, we're coming close to the end. Let's keep up. Next word is so that we might receive. The reason why Jesus would die for His people is right here in the verse. So that we might receive something. It's a gift, undeserved and unearned, but something that we would receive from God. The last word is adoption as sons. Adoption is when someone who isn't a part of someone's family is brought into their family and legally becomes their child. The gift we would receive from God through Jesus is we would be made children of God, and be given the full rights of sons. What an amazing gift! We weren't born as God's children, but we are adopted into His family and became children of God. So we can call God Father. Okay, now, knowing the meaning of the words, can we read Galatians 4 and 5 all together? The verses are in the box. Okay, go. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth His Son, born of woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. Guys, I'm so proud of you because you went through a tough part of Bible study like grown-ups do. I give you a big hands. Good job. Today, we saw the first part of the series of Christmas story. Is it time yet? Do you remember the two questions we asked at the beginning? 1. Why did Jesus come to the world? 2. Why did Jesus come when He did? Can you now answer these questions? We learned that the coming of Jesus is a part of the whole story of God rescuing His people. We saw the story of creation and fall that told us how people were made and how they fell to sin, so they were so in need of help. We also saw God's plan to rescue us through Jesus Christ, His Son. And the coming of Jesus did not happen by accident. It was in God's plan. When the time was complete, Jesus would come to redeem His people according to God's plan. So, people in Old Testament times, they expected to see Christ for a long time, but it wasn't time yet. We have to learn to be patient, waiting for God's time to be completed. That is how God works. Everything in God's plan is fulfilled in its right time. Okay, this is the activity for today. You can choose either writing the verse or coloring the hourglass, or you can do both. Enjoy your activity.